we have some additional coverage of the retaliatory tariffs on China, which again, these are absolutely fucking huge because the total tariff rate on China is 125%. This is virtually an embargo. There was a reporter who asked Scott Bessent if that's what this was, verbatim, an embargo, and he goes, I actually have never heard that word before. I'm being facetious, but he denied this being a trade embargo, but that's virtually what it is. You are permitting trade with your second or third biggest trading partner, a trading partner who, again, is responsible for manufacturing a large portion of your consumer products. China has pushed back again on President Donald Trump's tariff policy by hiking its levies on U.S. imports to more than 80%. Tariffs on U.S. goods entering China will rise to 84% from 34% starting April 10th, according to a translation of an Office of the Tariff Commission of the State Council announcement. The hike comes in response to the latest U.S. tariff increase on Chinese goods to more than 100% that began at midnight. The tit for tat escalation of tariffs threatens to crush trade between the world's two largest economies, according to the Office of U.S. Trade Representative. The U.S. exported $143.5 billion worth of goods to China, while importing products worth $438.9 billion. This one fucking paragraph, not even this paragraph, this one sentence highlights the exact reason why the United States should avoid a trade war with China, and also why the United States will never win a trade war with China. The justification for Trump's tariffs is, again, that it will revitalize American manufacturing. That is silly to think if you do not couple it with industrial policy. Tariffs are trade protectionist policy, but you need to have something to protect. You need to also manufacture goods that the rest of the world will want to consume. It doesn't fucking matter if Argentina or Vietnam calls you to negotiate. What the fuck are the Vietnamese going to do with a goddamn Ford F-150? The Trump administration announced a sweeping new tariff policy last week, warning other countries not to retaliate. Some nations, including Japan, have seemed willing to negotiate on tariffs, but China appears to be taking a more hardline stance and quickly announced a counter tariff. After China's initial response to the April 2nd tariff rollout, Trump announced an additional 50% hike, putting the total level for import taxes on Chinese goods at 104%. Quote, it's unfortunate that the Chinese actually don't want to come and negotiate because they are the worst offenders of the international trading system. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox Business on Wednesday after China's latest announcement, they have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. Let's read between the lines here. What is so unfair about Chinese manufacturing? What is so ridiculous and so imbalanced about the Chinese economy? It's that they do not participate in laissez-faire capitalism like the rest of the Western world. China has tremendous state-run businesses. China has tremendous subsidies for their businesses. And China also forces private corporations to capitulate to the government. In the United States and in virtually every other Western capitalist nation, it is the other way around. The governments work at the behest of the corporations. China does not allow that. They disappeared Jack Ma, for example. The United States, it's literally the exact opposite. There were the wealthiest people on the fucking planet were at Donald Trump's inauguration. Obviously, there are other Western countries where this is not as flagrant. I look at, Norway, the Scandinavian countries that are more social democratic, but that doesn't fucking matter because none of them are the hegemonic global superpower. Why does this upset Scott Bessent? Well, it's very simple. when government is heavily involved in commerce, it is very hard for capitalist nations to compete with them. Why is this? Government can offer goods and services at effectively wholesale. If you don't believe me, look at your fucking water bill. If your water comes from your municipality, it is oftentimes 2 to 3 times cheaper than a private water company. Let's look at the Nordic oil and gas system, or just the naturalized oil and gas infrastructure in any country. When the government owns the oil reserves and the natural gas reserves, they can sell that to the consumer at a reduced price because they don't have to make a profit on it. And they also don't have to make profits quarter over quarter. And they don't have to make exorbitant profits because they don't need massive compensation packages for their leadership. Scott Bessent is like a multi-hundred millionaire, I think. He loves capitalism. And he loves capitalism because corporations can exploit not only the workforce, but the consumer as well. They exploit the workforce by outsourcing their labor to nations that allow slave wages, and that's obviously an issue in and of itself. That should not be the case. But then they also exploit the consumer by jacking up prices whenever the fuck they want. Later on Wednesday, Trump announced that he was hiking tariffs on China even higher to 125%. The U.S. had already imposed new tariffs on China before it rolled out its full trade policy in April. China, along with Canada and Mexico, was hit with new levies at the start of Trump's second term as part of what the administration says was an effort to stop fentanyl entering the United States. The trade war has spooked investors around the world by increasing the odds of slower economic growth, higher inflation, and lower corporate profits, sparking a sharp sell-off in April. The market, as short-sighted as it may be, does still provide the opportunity for some analysis. If there are tariffs on goods, goods become more expensive. If it becomes more expensive to import goods, goods that are manufactured in the United States also become more expensive because the corporation sees it as an opportunity to increase their prices. However, if there are fewer imports, there's fewer demand. Eventually, businesses are going to have to start laying people off. If people don't have jobs, they don't have money. And if they don't have money, they can't fucking buy anything. Major retailers have halted productions or imports of certain goods because of these tariffs, like the Nintendo Switch. It was announced earlier today that Amazon is holding certain imports because of these tariffs. If you have anybody in your family who works with factories overseas, particularly in China, they are going through the same thing. If you have people who work in logistics, I'm sure that they are coordinating with not only vendors but also factories to make sure that, goods are not going out when they're supposed to be. The S&P 500 finished Tuesday down nearly 20% from its peak, putting the U.S. large cap stock index in a bear market. South Korea's Kospi index fell into a bear market of its own on Wednesday. Stocks in Shanghai and Hong Kong are also down sharply since the U.S. tariff announcement on April 2nd. The fears of this, the fears of a global recession, will impact the markets all over the world, as we are seeing. However, China does have the ability to weather this storm both domestically and internationally. Not only can they support themselves domestically, but countries will eventually align themselves further with China. Because China is also appears to be a more rational actor. The United States, especially in this second Trump term, has become increasingly more insane in regards to the flippant policy decisions and also their treatments of allies and like treaties, trade agreements, stuff like that. Leaders around the world, look at how Donald Trump is treating Canada and Mexico, and they're like, I don't want to fucking do business with this guy. I mean, literally, Canada and Mexico, the two fucking biggest trading partners that we have, and Donald Trump is fucking abusing them.